Okay, well, we'll call the meeting to order of the Water Supply Planning Committee of the Water Management District on September the 7th. Call the roll, please, Joel.
Director Adams. Director Paul.
Here.
Alternate Director Edwards.
Here.
Chair Riley.
Here.
Chair Riley, we have a quorum of the committee.
Thank you. We'll start with the first item on the agenda is comments from the public. If there's any member of the public would like to speak on an item not mentioned. Anyway, any member of the public.
Yes, please signal to me by raising your hand if you would like to make public comment on items not on today's agenda. And Chair Riley, I do not see anybody with their hands raised.
Okay, and I don't see any other people on the attendance list anyway. Okay, so back to the committee. Action item is the adoption of the minutes of the last meeting on August 2nd. Are there any comments on that item? Well, I asked the public if they have any comments again. I think we're going to have to go through this motion each time.
Chair Riley, I do not see anybody with their hands raised. Okay,
back to the committee. If there no comments, I have a note. Go ahead. I don't know who that was.
That was probably me. I move approval.
Okay, is there a second?
Yes, I'll second. I forgot we have to formally approve the minutes. Yes.
Yeah, my notes, anyway, they don't relate to this. Okay, roll call, please, Joel.
Alternate Director Edwards.
Approval.
Director Paul.
Yes.
Chair Riley.
Aye.
The motion passes.
Thank you. Next item for discussion, Dave will ask you. The item is Pure Water Monterey project.
Right. So it's going to be a very short meeting because we wanted to report back primarily on item 4, but we owe you an update anyway on both the base project, Pure Water Monterey, item 2, and the expansion, item 3. So for item 2, I'll introduce Maureen Hamilton, who's project manager for the deep injection well work, which is pretty much the last remaining item. And then John Lear, if you can just touch at a very high level on the tracer test, the extrinsic test schedule, as well as just very high level what we're doing with the tracer study. So Maureen, let's start with you.
Sure. We've been drilling wells for almost a year now. If y'all have been driving by the Pure Water Monterey on General Jim Moore near San Pablo, you've been seeing an uptick in construction. The long lead time item for these wells has been the pump and motor manufacturer and deliver. Certainly COVID has hit the supply chain, as have the storms that have happened over the last year, including the last few months. Physically, the wells are constructed and in place. The electrician is running the conduit. You have to run the conduit underground. Once that's complete, the concrete pads for the wellhead and the electrical facilities get installed, and then we really begin installation of the above ground works in earnest. I expect the concrete to be poured at DIW 4, which you can see from General Jim Moore. That should be done, I'm hoping, early next week, and the next site should follow the week after that. We're still on schedule to start up in December. I say that with a word of caution. Certainly with the COVID continues to cause impacts with the project. One of our key personnel is out with COVID for the next 2 weeks. The design is in progress. They've completed the survey work. We're in the process of getting various permits to construct geotechnical bores and exploratory well bores. We're running into an interesting situation with the city. It's the first time since the land has handed over from Fora, that they have had to run through this, and certainly they've had considerable turnover. So we're kind of walking through that process hand in hand. And lastly, we're just waiting on the water purchase agreement to apply for funding for the construction. And that's all I have.
Great.
Is this an amendment to the water purchase agreement, the initial one?
No, well, so let's not mix up our expansion with our base project. So these wells are underneath the original water purchase agreement, and they were put in to expand capacity and provide operational flexibility and redundancy. So all that work is in there. The city of Seaside, their kind of lack of familiarity with this whole process does come home to roost on the expansion, which we'll talk about in just a second.
I was just going back to Maureen made a comment about waiting for a water purchase agreement. Is that for
yes, the
expansion? Okay. And Maureen, what's that image behind you? Is that the backwash pond or something?
That is the backwash pond and well site 2. I got to get my left and right there. Or excuse me, well site 3 with deep injection well 2. Yeah.
It's a very nice photo.
Thank you.
To the chair.
Yes.
Go ahead, Director Paul. You want to say something before I say it?
No.
Okay.
No.
My question is this. When does the water year end? When do we supposed to have Cal-Am looking for the 3,500?
Beginning October 1st. Well, no. So the 3,500 spins off fiscal year. So we're in that fiscal year right now. The water year ends at the end of September.
Right.
So they will do their kind of their quarterly water budget planning and their both intake and extraction based on the water year. The waste discharge permit, which handles how much water can go into the ground, is on a calendar year basis. The current waste discharge permit is for 3,700 acre feet a year, which only allows for the 3,500 plus 200 to the reserves. In July, we took 165 acre feet into the reserves. So we're holding all future reserve deposits until after these wells come online in December or January. And after the Monterey 1 Water amends their waste discharge permit, they're trying to bring it up to 4,300 acre feet a year, which for the next fiscal year / water year will allow some additional supply to be provided to Cal-Am if all things work out, and will allow us to catch up on the operating reserve deposits.
So my question is, are we going to meet that 3,500 this round? Because the first year, I think it was 900. This year, are we going to hit the 3,500?
Yeah, so the first year, I believe, was because it was a partial year, began September 1st.
Right.
We set the company allotment at 2,805 or something like that. I'd have to check, but my recollection is we met that. But yeah, it's this fiscal year where the 3,500 should and should be met, or should and will be met. You know, we've been averaging over 300 acre feet a month, except for short months like February. And so that's 3,600. But if the new wells come online, then we can kick that up a little bit, get our 3,700. And then if the waste discharge permit is modified by April, then we'll have May and June to pick up a little bit extra for the reserves. So, you know, everything points to success until some sort of catastrophic event happens, which we're not expecting, because they just get better and better at operating both the plant and monitoring injections. And so, you know, things are going pretty well.
Okay, that was my main concern. I don't want to go in default. because they're labeling it up as the second default and things started happening, I guess. Okay, thank you.
Karen, you have? Dave, the tracer test, is that part of the this project or the expansion?
It's part of this project. We will also have to update it for the expansion. And John, why don't you just touch base on that? We've been, since early June, late May, kind of talking about the intrinsic tracer test results as well, physical results, as well as the modeling, and then some updates to the modeling have been going on, and we're about to start what's called an extrinsic tracer test study. So John, if you will.
Sure, thanks, Dave.
Yeah.
As Dave was saying, the rules, the regulations for injecting of highly treated water, you can do different types of tracer tests. One is the intrinsic tracer test, which was done when we first started injecting into the ground, and that's using just differences in chemistry of the native water in the Seaside Basin and the highly treated water, and then seeing when tracking them as they show up in the different well fields down gradient. That was completed, but in the regulations, you only get 2/3 of the credit for an intrinsic tracer test. Looking at the results, of the intrinsic tracer test, we have chosen to move to the extrinsic tracer test, which is adding an actual chemical to the injected water and then tracking, watching for that chemical. And in the rules for the permitting of the Pure Water Monterey base project, that will give you a 1-for-1 time that you can demonstrate with the extrinsic tracer test. So we have a plan together, and we have ordered the chemicals and the injection pumps, and we're targeting September 16th as the start date for the extrinsic tracer test. And we would think that it would probably last through December as it goes, would travel past the ASR Santa Margarita site. And we are attempting to do this now because we don't want to be injecting Carmel River water while we're trying to do the extrinsic tracer test. So the timing of this is do the extrinsic tracer test, have it be done, and then be able to move into injection for Carmel River.
That's a good time frame. I like hearing that. What didn't Cal-Am write a letter about the water quality standard and objecting a little bit to the lack of time in the ground? Does that qualify as a notice of default?
No, because the letter was in error. We have a joint letter going out probably tomorrow, if not today, addressing the concerns raised in that letter. The biggest mistake was in the first sentence where it suggested that we've actually violated the travel time. We have not. It's been identified as potential if ASR 1 was turned on as a production well. So the whole earlier remediation was to leave ASR 1 turned off while further investigating travel times and solutions to travel time. So,
well, they're standing on our corner looking at everything, standing on our necks looking at everything. That's what I meant to say, standing on our shoulders. Okay, that sounds like a thorough update from my standpoint. Any questions, other questions from the committee?
Yeah, I have one.
Yes.
What happens if it rains before December while you're still in the middle of the extrinsic test? Does that mess things up?
Are you asking just about the actual rain on the ground, or are you asking about triggering ASR operations?
Triggering ASR operation, triggering a situation where you would normally inject.
Our permits only allow they identify a time frame from December 1 to May, to the end of May, that we're allowed to inject. So even if we do get rains, we can't
Oh,
defer.
not until December 1st. I'd forgotten that. Thank you. Okay, that's good.
But the tracer test would not have to be cut off if it started raining and on December 1st we got the flows. We're going to start injecting, right? Will we have to? Could we still inject if you're still going through this tracer test, or do we have to wait?
I think you can inject as long as, and that's why we're starting now based on the travel times we've seen before, it will have gone past the ASR wells that would be needed to inject. So it would in effect speed up the arrival at the Cal-Am well field down gradient because now you have more water being injected behind the chemical tracer, but that is I do not think that the tracer test, the timing of the tracer test is starting in a couple weeks to avoid that.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think we have the option of starting injection at ASR 3, depending on volumes. And so if you didn't need to inject at ASR 1 and 2, you know, you could go down outside of the realm possible. I don't know, John, if you want to comment on that, but.
Right, we can. It depends. There's the permits are a little nuanced and sometimes do force you into using one site over another. But you, generally speaking, yeah, there is some freedom.
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that we're ready to inject December the 1st. If the rain start coming and it doesn't screw up our tracer test, because I don't want Cal-Am saying this happened and that happened. Let's make sure we clarify with them in case things start happening.
Yeah, I just like the way you talk as if we're going to get rain. So that's good. Keep that up.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I hope so. Okay. Thank you.
All right. Thanks. They're good questions and comments. Let's go to item number 3, which is the expansion.
Yeah. So on expansion, Maureen touched on it just a little bit. You know, the expansion is going to require 2 new wells in the well field, as well as additions to the advanced water purification facility. Should likely not require any conveyance facility modifications. But as Maureen mentioned, we would like to get going with test borings on the new well sites in short order. And in order to do so, we've got the county's permission, and it's not entirely clear that we need the city of Seaside's permission because it's not truly grading, it's other stuff. But Maureen is in contact with the remaining representatives of the city of Seaside who are there. Sherry Dameron, is that right, Maureen?
Damon, D-A-M-O-N.
Damon, yeah, Damon, right. Seems to be carrying the point rather than their public works director, but both are involved, and we will see what comes out in the next week or two. And with that, the remainder on Pure Water Monterey expansion is that there is a schedule, an executive schedule that had completion and beginning of operations in December of 2023. The first draft of the water purchase agreement that I thought we would come to terms on had a no later than start date of October 1, 2024. We've made the informal request, but we're going to need to reiterate it when we have discussions on the water purchase agreement. That clearly that's going to need to move to, to December because we've just lost a couple of months in the negotiation process over the water purchase agreement. And so everything kind of spins off the water purchase agreement, except for these test borings. The ability of the district to offer up any monies or amend their cost sharing agreement can't move forward until we've got agreement on the water purchase agreement. The state revolving fund loan application can't move completely forward until we've got a water purchase agreement. We have started discussions with Monterey One Water about the federal WIFIA loan program application. It obviously will need the agreement at some point in time. The timelines that the state revolving fund work on are, we can submit part of our application now and then fill in some of the blanks over time, but they may not be able to act on anything until April or later. Same thing with the federal folks. So we're starting to look at, and I know Mike McCullough's on, I may have just gotten those dates wrong. So Mike, text me if I'm wrong on the state revolving fund. But we're also looking into bridge financing, either through bank lending or a public offering, just to make sure that we've got capital in hand to move forward. So we're trying to basically set the stage or lay the foundation for getting going. But clearly, again, we can't move forward at all unless it's a real project, which means we need a commitment for the output, whatever that might be.
I've seen some more people that joined the meeting. Joel, can we go out for public comment?
Yeah, you've got, I think, Tim O'Halloran, Mike McCullough, and then somebody in as a guest.
Chair Riley, I don't see anybody with their hands raised.
I just want to make sure that the public knows that we take public comment. So I just want to remind them again.
Yeah.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions from the committee on the expansion?
Okay. This from me on the expansion. At some point, we need to draw up that alternative. I hear you talking. I know what you're talking about, but we need to go back to those alternatives if we're going to do it ourselves and introduce that to the public. So I don't know what we got to do on that, but we need to do it and get it out of the way so people know if this falls through, the water purchase agreement falls through, we may try something else. So when can we have that brought back to, brought to the full board?
Well, as I stated on one of our previous calls, we could come up with a fabulously grand plan, all of which is implementable, but none of it's implementable if we don't have Monterey One Water on board to build a project on their property in support of some alternative rather than a direct sale to California Americans. So we need to solve that nut before we can, or crack that nut before.
Well, I would just like for a board discussion, this is what's gonna have to take place. All those things that you got in your mind that needs to take place, and be realistic as you can, and say, we got to talk to Monterey One Board. That might take 3 months. All the stuff that we need to do, the public needs to hear it. They need to hear it. The board needs to discuss it, and the public can give us feedback. Don't do it, it's too long or whatever, but that alternative is given to them so we can move to the next step if we have to on that water purchase agreement. So that's, when can we get that to the board? I hope this month. We got a water purchase agreement this month, but if I don't, I need to, the board needs to see the alternative and how long, and let's be realistic. It could take 2 or 3 more years to get to where we're gonna go, and let's tell the public that so we can go to our next steps on negotiations or whatever. I hope you have it done before that September meeting, the agreement, but it needs to be introduced to the public and the board needs to see it. So.
Yeah, I think the last discussion we had is that when, Dave, you come back to the board with some action or whatever around the water purchase agreement, there'll be, I don't know, I'm not going to say the recommendation, but whatever you report, there'll be some language in there that may or may not fly smoothly or not. But in that particular report, you may outline in some general way what our options might be. I don't say every possible option, but maybe the 2 that are the most possible ones or something. And then that doesn't mean you've solved all the issues, but it does point out the track.
Yeah, we went through Water Supply Planning Committee. I think it was in May, but I don't have my dates correct.
Yes, this was.
You know, 5 different options, the first 2 of which involved Cal-Am as the off-taker. The other 3 did not. So we can kind of pull those together. But again, the clear starting point is you can't build a project on somebody else's property. So you got to have them involved.
And I agree with that. And the only thing I wanted the public to know, we can't do that like that. And it's not going to be automatic. It would take 3 or 4, it would take discussions with them. And that's all I want to do is just lay it out to them so we can continue on with these negotiations that we got with Cal-Am over the water purchase agreement. I prefer a water purchase agreement, but if I can't get there or we can't get there, hey, let's show the public the alternative and spell it out to them. That's all I want to do.
Yep.
Yeah. I think that would be a good thing to do.
Here.
Yeah, I think we should do that. I'm not sure what the best timing is, whether September or October. Maybe we should think about October because maybe we can actually get an agreement before the September. Wouldn't that be good? That would be best.
I agree with you. I'm willing to wait, but it's going to have to be done. If we get a water purchase agreement before the next meeting, fine. If we end up waiting till the October meeting, I like to see something being drawn up so we can give it to the public. So that's just me.
I'm just, in terms of timing, I'm just trying to think what's best in relation to, what helps the most to improve the chances of coming to an acceptable water purchase agreement, which is what we all prefer.
I just want everybody to know that we're thinking about it.
Yeah,
well, and I guess it's a little bit apropos, since we're on the subject of expansion and the water purchase agreement, to just let you know that my conversations with staff at the Public Utilities Commission on Friday did call into question a little bit of why are we even going through with an quote unquote an application for a water purchase agreement when the existing already approved water purchase agreement allows you to change the company allotment. And so we'll discuss more of that offline, but generally speaking, with the balancing account treatment on purchased water, a lot of the water purchase agreements are just deemed to be approved until the 9 Class A investor-owned utilities get into conversations about rate basing it. And it's not always required to be part of a general rate case. The term used was, it could be anytime, anywhere, moving those amounts from the balancing account into rates. And so we seem to be being, I don't know, rightly or wrongly, but held to a slightly different standard. This is an already existing water project where all we're talking about is expanding its output. It's, the reason it went the way it did before, the application was a 9.6 MGD desal plant or a 6.4 million gallon per day desal plant with Pure Water Monterey expansion. So it was treated much more like a project application at the time. And the approval of the water purchase agreement was essentially the approval of the project. But the project now exists. And there are entities up and down the state that have the ability to ask for more water from an existing project without going through a lengthy application to the commission and so forth. So we may have just started down a wrong path here.
And keeping in mind, in this instance, for the expansion, Cal-Am is just receiving water and paying for it. They're not investing in the plant in any way. They're not managing the plant. They're just a recipient of water. And they pay for what they get, and if they don't get it, if they don't want it, they don't pay for it.
Yeah, and the existing draft has kind of steered a little bit away from that concept as well. So,
well, it sounds like if the PUC is suggesting that it's basically already approved, and these are mechanical steps, but not an approval step that has to take place. It sounds like it's a quicker track.
Yeah. you have to distinguish who it is that we're talking to at the PUC. This is not the PUC.
Okay.
This is staff members that work for a particular internal division of it.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Division of Water and Audits and Public Advocate's Office don't always agree on everything eye to eye. So
don't tell Karen that.
I just want to make sure that I hear you, and I probably agree with you all, but I just want other options out there. The public needs to know them. So if we can get this done, I'll be happy. I don't want to do that other option if I don't have to, but it needs to be discussed and it needs to be given to the public. Transparency is we're not holding anything back from them. So
I think it would be good to give the public more information about that. So, so they know that, if we reach an impasse with these negotiations, then we better think about another way to get there.
Yeah.
And
thank you, Vice Chair. I agree. Yeah. I agree.
Well, and trust me, if we do reach impasse, it's not going to be the public agencies doing. We presented a pretty clear framework for just buying water, more water. So, if the company wants to buy more water in the path of least resistance in the shortest time possible, they have a path in front of them to do so. And if it doesn't happen, it will be at their feet.
Thank you.
Dave, can you just quickly summarize the cost of the expansion project in terms of the total cost of the project, and then how much grant money seemed to be on the line to underwrite it?
Yeah, so Friday or Thursday, I forget when our call was, I think it was Friday, Monterey One Water reiterated 42 million as all inclusive for the public agency owned components. So that would be 2 deep injection wells and the advanced water purification facility modifications. So 42 million. There are additional costs for new extraction wells and appurtenant pipelines and so forth, as well as the parallel pipeline that California American will do for the benefit of their system. I don't have current numbers on that, and they have not gone to bid. And off the top of my head, I can't even remember what we used in there as a plug about 3 or 4 years ago. But it'll be in the, should be in the less than 15 million area, but not 100% positive.
The 15 million rate relates to what?
Extraction wells, the pipeline to the extraction wells, and then parallel pipeline in General Jim Moore Boulevard for the operational flexibility.
Which puts it at 57 million. Is that the total? More
and that's where over the last couple of years, we've had a little bit of disconnect, because oftentimes Monterey One would quote the cost of the improvements at the AWPF, the Advanced Water Purification Facility. Now they're at least including the injection wells. But we've often done the numbers inclusive of the extraction wells. So both pieces, public and Cal-Am. And
then the grant money that might be available, or the financing money, how does that relate to the total?
Yeah, so
I'm just looking at broad issues here. I'm not
Right. So it's unclear at this moment if the 19.6 million of grant money from the Bureau of Reclamation can be shifted from the base project to this project. Clearly, part of it needs to go back into the base project anyway to reimburse some funds and possibly be used to offset the debt service reserve fund. Can't be used for reserves, but it could be used for paying down the loan, which would free up money that would have gone to pay the loan. There's different ways to skin that cat. So maybe some of that money will be used. There will be 2 new water infrastructure programs coming out, one from the federal programs, one coming from the infrastructure bill and then one coming from a different bill. There's also the earmark request that Monterey 1 did through the senator's office that we wrote letters of support for. And then we put in a request for state funding for a 6th injection well as a drought resiliency project. And then we also put in a brief request. I don't think it counts as formal, but it's kind of so Department of Water Resources could kind of put together a list of half the cost of deep injection well number 6 as an IRWM quick funding option. The state revolving fund itself, if we can get in the next round and get on their list, it's about 1.2% money. And then WIFIA, I thought was closer to 4% money. Mike McCullough says it's in the 2s. So it'd be very inexpensive financing. That would be, it would come with it the ability to defer your first principal payment or your first debt payment until after the project comes online. So we're pursuing all of these things. The bridge debt from a bank is something that Marina Coast Water District did for their RUAP pipeline project that then I think they got funded somewhat in part both. I don't know if they got a state revolving fund loan, but they did get IRWM monies. So we're looking into everything. At the end of the day, you know, the worst case would be that likely the district would do a public offering and then lend the proceeds to the project and then collect off of the installment sale of water to repay certificates of participation. But we're getting a little in the weeds, but you know, it'll be a combination of lending and grant money with a preference towards state revolving fund monies because it's the cheapest.
What was the other source of public money, public low-cost loan money that
you so it's called WIFIA, which was the Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act about 4 or 5 years ago, and it created a federal loan program similar to TIFIA, which is a federal transportation loan program. It's a flexible borrowing program as an alternative to tax-exempt financing by public agencies. We're on a placeholder list. The application would have to go in, I believe, by December to start that process. And again, keep in mind that State Revolving Fund and the WIFIA program both have their own timeline issues. So if we really wanted to get going on construction, that's where either A, big chunk of grant monies could get us started, or B, some bridge financing could get us started. And so I think, you know, that needs to be further advanced.
And the state revolving fund application process, is that annual or more often?
It's whenever you're ready. So it's like, you know, you get your first application in when you think you have your project online. They will, you know, they've got a checklist of everything they need at the state. And what you don't have, you're going to have to get in by a certain date and by a certain date. And so your application will be deemed complete when everything's in. Not unlike our LAFCO process where there were still some other things that were needed. But then their review process and getting to a final agreement, a funding agreement, takes time as well. And so even if we get everything in, they can start their review. I don't think they're going to start really hard if there's not, you know, substantive material provided with the application, where it looks like it's a real project just waiting on, you know, 1 or 2 items. But
thank you.
Well, Dave, that's the kind of discussion what we just having right now is the kind I like to have at full board to tell everybody and the public what it's going to take. And, you know, the time is limited. So that's the kind of discussion I like to see at full board sooner than later.
And we may ask you questions. So you may as well be prepared, Dave.
That's why we're here.
Well, that's the kind of discussion I like to have. And that's the one I'm sort of like looking for so we can move it along. One question, Seaside Basin, water in it. I think I've seen in the ledge, your administrative thing for the ledge, that it could be some money out there for us to add water to it. Storage. Is that digging storage, or is that putting water in that kind of storage? I don't want to step on Seaside Basin toes, but they need to get some water.
Yeah, so all of these bills, both state and federal, have categories for storage as well as for groundwater. So to the extent you're protecting the groundwater, you know, many of these have existing programs in place which are competitive in nature, so you have to write an application. Others don't have their programs defined yet. So you have to think of it in terms of, and I guess state and federal are about the same. The state is less likely to use earmarks, and the federal government just brought them back a couple of years ago. But an earmark is usually a small chunk of money for a specific project that gets identified in a specific spending bill. In this case, we're probably looking at the Bureau of Reclamation's budget bill might likely have the earmark in it that was requested for Pure Water Monterey. Then there's programs like Water Smart that have different purposes, you know, drought contingency planning, project planning grants and so forth. And those are an application process. And then the Bureau's WIN Act, which was basically sponsored by Dianne Feinstein, created a pool of money that is then distributed through the Bureau of Reclamation. That's also competitive, but it was a different process. And so, and the first year, the fiscal allocation was, you know, successful. That was 4.3 million. And that, I think, raised our visibility so that the next application, which covered 2 fiscal year appropriations, was much more successful. And that's kind of how we've done it to date. All of these new bills, though, contain new programs, not all of which have a program in place to release the money. So we're, you know, as we talked about at Ledge Advocacy, the first thing is, you know, we're not even there on the $3.5 billion infrastructure package. It's only gone through the Senate. There's been bipartisan Senate work on it, but it needs to come back through the House, and then the committees have to get together. And right now they're talking about gutting it to almost half its size. And so we have to see what comes out of it first. So the way we dealt with most of the legislation is go try to find a pocket of money that we think we might qualify for, then figure out what the process is to get it, and then try to go get it. You know, I think on the state, the Prop 1 money side, Monterey One Water, primarily through Mike McCullough, did a really good job of pairing, like the state revolving fund loan application was paired with a grant request. And I can't even tell you it was a grant request. It was just like, hey, we need this much money. And they said, okay, we're going to give you a loan for this much and a grant for this much. Then there was a joint application between Monterey One Water and the city of Salinas, a portion of which was attributable to Monterey One Water. And that was done with Monterey One kind of working with the city of Salinas to get their act together and get it in there. So that's how it works, you know, as I said, identifying the pockets of money and then figuring out if we can actually qualify and get an application in for most of them. Earmarks are the only thing where you may just wake up one day and go, hey, look, you know, they got it through the process, it's in the bill, and if they vote yes, then we'll get some money. So.
Well, I just want to remind you, Dave, that we, at least I am, interested in if you need grant writer assistance or somehow, I think we're really open to what you might bring back to us on how we might proceed on that. But yeah, it might be better to be a little ahead of that curve as opposed to wait and see.
Well, right. I mean, you know, once we see a bill in its final form, then we'll know what we're looking at. But the two things to think about on this topic. One is the owner has to be the applicant. And so it's Monterey One Waters for Pure Water Monterey expansion. So just as we did previously, we would support the effort. We would contribute money. We'd write a little bit, edit a little bit. For the fisheries and watershed resources, which are different other pockets of money that we did talk to Ledge Advocacy about, that would be all on us. And so, you know, we kind of have to, you know, split our activities depending. But if there are good opportunities out there, you can bet that Monterey One will come and ask for 75 cents on the dollar. And if we know that we're in a position to move forward on the project, we'd give it to them.
And they, even with storage of water, do that fall on us or Monterey One Water?
Well, so good question. So if we were to do something separately for the Seaside Basin and put water in the ground, that could very easily fall to us. We have had a discussion with the Water Master, Cal-Am, Monterey One, and ourselves. And we likely, the district, are the only ones who could pretty much by authority, by legal authority, create a secure revenue stream for that purpose. So, you know, and again, the problem in that area is if we were doing a project to fill the basin, and one way to do this, you know, we're getting a little far afield, but one way to do this and still benefit Cal-Am for their needs would be to say, hey, in year one, you don't get 2,250 acre feet. We'll let you schedule in how much you think you're going to need for growth and water supply protection, you know, a couple hundred acre feet. The remainder goes to us for delivery either to Marine Coast Water District, Seaside Muni, or the Water Master, or ourselves. And if it's to the Water Master or ourselves, it would be for storage. That clearly would fall to the district funding if it's us for our own storage, building a drought reserve. That wouldn't get the project built though, because the advanced water purification and the deep injection wells would still be, you know, ostensibly the deep injection wells we could have ownership of. It would kind of split the well field up, but these are all on easements. So it's not like an owned property of Monterey One or the district. But the advanced water purification improvements would clearly be Monterey One. And so any grants or loans or whatever would have to go to them. But on the storage side, yeah, we could tap it. Prop 1 doesn't really have much left for storage, and their big section on storage was run by the California Water Commission, and it was solely for storage that could improve environmental flows for the benefit of Bay Delta. And so they managed to cleverly make it only apply to folks who are in either the San Joaquin or the Sacramento River basins. So folks like us didn't qualify for any of that Prop 1 storage money that was out there. So.
Yes, Karen.
Question, thinking relatively long-term, if we stored water in the Seaside Aquifer, it would have a value, wouldn't it? Would it have
yeah, absolutely.
A value that somehow would show up on our books that could help with our overall situation?
Yeah, I mean, when you say help, I'm not sure what you mean.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that wasn't clear. Would it be counted as an asset and stored water of the district? Yeah,
and so currently the operating reserve of Pure Water Monterey is counted as an asset. One of the the cautions we had when the first round of the water purchase agreement was discussed, and the company was trying to get, you know, full year's worth of water in the ground. You really don't want to carry an asset on your books that you never intend to use. And if you do use it, you have to replenish it within a fixed period of time. And so we've tried really hard to keep the performance guarantees in the water purchase agreement draft to be reasonable. But, you know, we will be carrying a couple $1 million worth of asset on our books for the operating reserve. If we were to store a significant amount of water in the Seaside Basin for our own account as kind of a, you know, a regional drought reserve that we could, you know, ultimately sell to, oh, I don't know, Marina Coast or Cal-Am or what have you, then we would carry the asset until it's extracted from the ground, and then it becomes an expense or a revenue. If we sold water to the water master for protective water levels, then we would expect them to pay us and it would become their asset. Now, the problem with that is they have a real need. They've stated a real need. Because it's adjudicated, they don't have the same pressure that Sigma has put on all these groundwater basins to actually solve their problem. So it's easier for an adjudicated basin to just kind of blithely move along without really solving its problem. But to do a solution, the water master really would need to come up with an infrastructure plan on how to move water around, how to inject it, and then how to pay for it, how to pay for the water itself. And they don't really have a good funding mechanism. So, you know, as I stated earlier, the district is the only one that really has statutory authority. You know, ostensibly Cal-Am could possibly find a way to do it as the largest member of the water master and then fund it. But there's some other ugly issues about the water master and doing replenishment, because, and I think I've mentioned this before, many folks, including the current water master chair and technical advisory person, say, well, we just need to look forward. This is a problem we need to solve on behalf of everybody. Others could easily say, and when I say others, the simplest example is take the population of the Carmel Valley and Pebble Beach, and they could say, well, we've never received any water from the Seaside Basin, so your problem was created by you, and therefore we don't want to participate. And it could create, you know, quite a bit of discussion before you could even get to a point of doing a Prop 218 to create a revenue stream for that. And so I think we as the district should, this is where I got into trouble with you guys 6 months ago, saying, yes, we could finance it.
But you did right. That's your job to tell us.
But it is the same thing with the water master. Yes, we could finance it, but there's a lot of hair on this one, which is, should we finance it? Should everybody in the district be a participant? Did alternate producers who have no monetary means to really participate create much of the problem that we're trying to solve? Where do we draw the line between past practice and fixing something moving forward, and who should really pay? It's the who should pay is always a huge part of how do you pay? And you know, I think there's a lot of unresolved issues.
Yeah.
Well, that's the point on we're a public agency and having these public discussions so we can, you know, it comes out. I know you hate to tell us that we can do something and we start going after it, but we can to the public here that we can. You know, that's my point. The public here and the board here. And then the decision making comes up. What we're going to do. Yeah, I hear you, Dave. I hear you good. You're right about that. But you're doing your job by telling us.
Yeah, and we're telling the public too that we're not going to give up. Okay.
Yeah.
If this road is blocked, we're going to find another one.
Well, and you know, and keep in mind too that if we were to be enabled to build the expansion project on our own, you know, if Cal-Am said, oh, great, we're out, we're not going to participate. Now we're going to have to resurrect our desal plant sooner than we thought, more immediate. If we structured it in a way that there is still water available that we would be willingly able to offer Cal-Am on an annual basis that meets the growing demand needs, I can't foresee that they'd ever get past the Coastal Commission because, again, you know, a feasible alternative with less environmental impact would be sitting right there. So there's, you know, a variety of different ways to skin this cat, but one is by not committing all of the water to others, but committing it to, you know, ourselves for drought reserve and to any entity who would like to buy an increasing amount of water every year for 25 or 30 years. So, I mean, you know, these are solutions are out there. You know, most of it's, as we've often said, you can engineer anything, but the real decisions are going to be political and financial.
Thank you. Okay.
And I just want to add just a comment that I think as we kind of go down the road for trying to look for water supply, as long as we keep our eyes on the objective of providing water and getting out from under the CDO, we're doing the job that the public expects us to do. And I think as we step forward with proposing, not even proposing, discussing options going forward, we're still doing what's expected of us. And we're doing it in a transparent way. The thing that bothers me is that Cal-Am seems to have given up on the idea of providing water. And they're looking out for their own interests and not the community interests. So the more we kind of can still stay on this, on these various subjects in a discussion and in a discussion format, I think we're doing a job, and I think the public is expecting us to do that job.
Thank you, Chair.
Anyway, kind of a wrap up on that one.
Thank you.
Let's go to the Fort Ord Wells, and I want to remind the public, if there's anybody in the audience that wants to speak up, raise your hand somehow so we know. Otherwise, we're going to continue with our agenda. So Dave, on this Fort Ord Wells, please.
Yes, this is a two-parter. Part A is destruction of the Fort Ord number 9 shallow well that was having cross-contamination issues with the sand dune aquifer. And I think, John, if you can just let the committee know where that is.
Sure, Dave. So we brought this to the Water Supply Planning Committee and received direction from the Monterey County Health Department. We've come together with a plan of action to destroy the well that's acceptable to the health department. We then in September put it out to public bid. The public bid closed on August 11th, and we received one bid from Majora Brothers Drilling with the lump sum cost of $25,000 to complete the work that was outlined by the county health department. So we will be bringing this item to the administrative committee so it can, if it goes through that committee, it can be placed on the consent agenda for the September board meeting. This work was not envisioned because it was a discovery of the well in the state it's in, so it was not budgeted for. So we will need to earmark this if approved, and then take care of that money in the mid-year budget adjustment process, and that would be bringing $25,000 over to the hydrologic monitoring line item in the budget.
Great. So that's in process, and because we own the well, it's our decision. We don't have to collaborate, and that will be what we ask the board to do coming up shortly. The second piece of this is what to do about a replacement monitoring well. And so we included as an attachment or exhibit the requests to both Marina Coast Water District and the Water Master, asking them to collaborate or coordinate. And we kind of put it on them to figure out, you know, do they want to replace it? And if so, which of the entities will be the project lead on schedule, design, procurement? And we encourage them to make a proposal to us on cost sharing. We floated the idea of maybe 15% due to, you know, we still have an interest in keeping the data set complete for whatever reason and managing the overall water resource system. But, you know, we've made it clear in the letter that we don't have a compelling need for this monitor well. So I have communicated with Rem Scherzinger at Marina Coast Water District. We talked about getting together this week to kind of push it to the next steps, but I suspect this one will take, you know, this will be a few months. Again, the water master doesn't have much money, so it would go looking through to its members. The member that has the lion's share, and when I say lion's share, it's like 95% of the share is Cal-Am. So I think there's still some thinking that needs to be done between those two entities. I know they'd love for us to just do it because we can, but it's really not something that we need to put as a priority for us on our radar screen. So we'll keep the committee informed when we do hear back from the Water Master and Marina Coast, but just want to let you know that we did the formal ask instead of just letting it percolate out there because everybody knew it was coming, but no one was volunteering anything. So now we've given them something to volunteer on.
Good job too.
What's a ballpark for a new well? Ballpark cost?
Yeah, George, for or Director Riley, for a well of the depth of that, probably 120,000 with maybe 15% either way.
Okay. Okay. That's
yeah, and unlike our, you know, our deep injection wells for Pure Water Monterey, there's not a, you know, it's a monitor well. So you're not running conduit. You don't have, you know, you don't have pumps. It's a smaller diameter. It's screened differently. You know, just a kind of a different process. So.
Yeah, thank you. That's all I was looking for. Any other comments from the committee?
No, I appreciate the general manager sending out that letter, 2 letters to everybody, knowing that we're on this and we're going to look at it and making a statement that it's not really important to the district at this time. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah,
I sit on a water. I'm sorry, Karen.
No, I was just going to say thank you as well. Thank you for sending those letters. They're good.
Yeah, I sit on the water master, and I suggested that we didn't have the same level of interest that the other 2 parties did. And we will probably be considering some sharing that's not a third. They knew it was coming. I'm glad you spelled it out, Dave. So that's good.
So
very good. Always helps.
I'm sorry, just a question for our chair, for Director Riley. The Water Master Committee meetings have been happening sometimes?
About once every 3-4 months they meet.
They had one last week. They had one on the 1st. George was in good form.
Yeah, and Director Riley will occasionally crash a committee meeting like budget and finance or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and they've often interpreted my participation in the committee meeting adequate participation on several subjects. I complained about that at the last meeting and said, no, I'm a board member. I have issues that I want to discuss with the board, not just the committee. Right. And that went round and round a little bit, but it seemed to have made the point that I wanted to make. Okay.
Thank you.
Let's go to items on future agendas. I have 2 kinds of questions. One is the LAFCO cycle on schedule as near as you can tell, Dave?
Yeah.
I'm not sure if, I don't know, this is the discussion on future topics, so.
Yeah. No, we think it is. Dave,
all you can do is put it on as a future agenda item.
Yeah.
So it's an update. Okay.
Yeah.
And, okay. That's
we
fair
have a
enough.
meeting. We have a
I knew
meeting
the other
with-
Dave was going to weigh in. I just knew that.
Me too.
Yeah. My second question is, as I read more and more about rationing and the coming, I don't know, the winter time and El Nino, and anyway, state and all this other levels, what about having a review of the rationing steps, just so the public might know a little more about the problems that we're facing?
Yeah, so that's a good topic. We covered it in a GM report back in April or May, but it warrants bringing out again. We're kind of sitting on our hands a little bit, waiting for the recall election to go past, because right now Newsom's call was 15% voluntary. And if they make it mandatory or some other form mandatory, and I think we talked a little bit about this in a different venue, but that being said, we're planning on running full page ads. Well, TMD cut them down to half page and didn't understand we wanted full page. So it may not be this week, it'll probably be next week, on water waste and just public awareness. Problem I have is all of this comes at a very odd time, because beginning October, the irrigation season is over, and saving water heading into the winter makes less sense than saving water coming out of the winter. And, you know, if we see actual precipitation, you know, after you all done your rain dance here at this committee meeting, you know, we may not even need the rationing or the conservation stuff. But I think given the context of the voluntary call in the executive order, we should talk about it again. But the timing is just really wrong. I mean, seasonally just doesn't make any sense.
Well, it's okay, Dave, to, I think, talk about whether it's cautionary too early or cautionary that important at this point. But I just think the whole state's talking about it. So
yeah,
why can't we talk a little bit about it?
Sure.
Karen?
Yes. If we're in a situation where we need to think about rationing, how well informed are we about leaks, the situation with leaks in CalAm's system? And I mean, you may have done a lot of, I'm too new. I don't know how much you know, and whether any savings can be achieved through addressing leaks.
Dave, before you answer that question, this isn't free for all. This is items for future discussion. If you want to get off the phone and call Director Paul and give her a one-on-one answer, you may do so. But as far as this, it's not on the agenda.
Okay.
Yeah.
Topic for future meeting, either supply or demand committee. I mean, it could be either, as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm. Chair Edwards, do you have any thoughts on the future meetings?
No. I made my discussion earlier, what I would like to see done. So I'm just fine. This was a good meeting. This was a good meeting.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Dave, it was supposed to be a short meeting. It just got a little longer.
Oh, it's okay. No, that's, as long as it's good conversation, which it is. So no problem.
So I have nothing more to add. Does any other, Karen?
No, thank you. Very informative. Thank you, John and Maureen and Dave and Joelle. And
yes,
I learned a lot.
Yeah, my thanks to you all. That's right.
And I compliment Joelle for being in the weekly on his own, having nothing to do with the district.
And Director Paul, don't sit by your phone waiting for me to call you, as Dave Laredo suggested.
You mean you have things to do?
We'll come back around on the leak discussion, but some other time.
Okay.
Right. Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone. This meeting is closed. Thank you. We'll adjourn.
All right.
Bye-bye.